Dustin loves to tell stories of some of his adventures on the road, and so I thought it'd be kind of fun to have Dustin tell, and maybe, hopefully, please Lord, let it be educational. Because as the mother of a truck driver, it is really stressful on what a lot of these people put my son through. I'm just not gonna lie. So I'd love for him to share. What are you sharing with us?
Tales from Highway 18.
Go for it. Tell us a few tales.
Well, it depends on where you want to look. We have all kinds of stories. Most of them are usually, some of them are weather related. Like there was one storm I come back from. This just to give you an idea, we had hauled cows. We picked them up from over by Batesland here. It was just starting to spit snow when we loaded them. Took them down to McCook, Nebraska, which is less than half an hour from the Kansas line. It was 20 degrees and snowing when we left, sunny and 75 down there by the Kansas line. And you could just see looking north, there was a huge storm cloud building. You knew it was going to be bad. And these guys called me and said, hey, the highway is absolutely frozen up here. We can't get the pickup down Highway 18. Do not come home. Okay, I won't come home. I think I just need
Was
to get
it me that called you?
I think it was actually Dad, because you and Dad were coming back from town and said the pickup is sliding all over the highway.
Okay, I remember. Yeah, okay.
And I said, well, I know I can make it to Thetford. Thetford's pretty good. But there's a truck stop I really like in Valentine that's a little closer to home. So we're going to see if we can make it. Get to Thetford, there's nothing yet. The skies are dark, it's starting to get cold, but I think we can make it. Get 10 miles north of Thetford, we hit black ice, the truck immediately starts sliding. That had me worried enough, so we literally just reached up, locked the axles together, and we was crawling about 40 miles an hour for about 50 miles. The only traffic I ran into was a plow truck that was headed south. He stopped me in the middle of the highway. How far is the storm going? Well, it was just about to Thetford when I left, so you're going to have to run a ways to catch it. Oh, we slid all the way in. We finally got in.
Well, that crosses the river when you come down out of there.
But the plow truck had cleared off. I specifically asked him, is the bridge good across the river? Because I had my chains. I didn't want to put them on,
but you could have.
I could have put my chains on. But I tell you right now, if you got to put chains on a truck, you already are bracing for however bad it's going to be.
Yeah.
I literally got in there. I just made it into the truck stop. I had probably an extra 1,500 pounds of ice hanging off the truck everywhere because it'd been freezing rain.
Yeah.
So as it hit the truck, it froze to it.
Yeah.
It was so bad my headlights were just about to quit because it was almost freezing because it was dark.
And just so you know, from the mom side of this, I was at home praying nonstop because I knew he was driving through this.
Yep. I was just glad that by the time I made it to Valentine, that's part of the reason I went to this truck stop, even in this storm, with the highways all shut down and everything coming into town trying to escape it, I still found a spot to land.
Thank God for a good truck stop.
Oh man, I couldn't thank that truck stop enough. And there, Phillips 66 in Valentine for you truckers out there. Them boys take care of you. They will go the extra mile.
And they have a McDonald's.
They have a McDonald's and there's a bunkhouse saloon right next to it. The bunkhouse is really good.
Yes, that's true.
I can't say enough good stuff about them guys. They've been there. They go above and beyond for a trucker. Don't think they don't. It's like a tanker with all the liquid sloshing forward. When it hits that front, it'll actually slide a truck forward if it hits hard enough because there's just that much force. It's ridiculous. Like, people don't seem to understand. Yeah, I may have 3 times as many brakes on a truck like mine that's got 6 axles, but especially the weights I'm hauling, I usually weigh 18 times as much as your standard car does.
Well, standard pickup.
Standard pickup even, I weigh about 9 times as much depending on how big a pickup you're talking.
Yeah.
It's, like I say, people don't seem to get that half time. I actually had a friend who did an experiment with a friend of his, because she didn't seem to understand it either. She said, well, these trucks have more brakes on them. They can't take them that long to stop. Said, okay, I've got an idea. He jumped in a shopping cart and said, okay, get me running, try and stop me. And he was kind of a littler guy. So she did it, got him stopped. Then, okay, take Tiny over here, put him in a shopping cart, and try and get him up and running and stop him, see what happens. And she could barely get it stopped. Like, I felt impossible.
Tiny.
I don't know if that's his name.
Tiny was a big guy.
Tiny was a big guy.
Okay, just making sure I understood that.
Well, like say, she said, I couldn't get it stopped. It was almost impossible. Now you get it.
Yep.
And it's at that point actually made it plain as day. It changed her whole opinion on it.
Well, even pickups and trailers are that way. When I pull in pickup and trailers, one, you got to make a wider corner. That's just the way it goes. So you need to give people space, because if you're turning especially to the right, I have found. I don't know why it always seems that way. But you turn to the right and someone comes up on your blind spot over here as you're turning. It can go either way, but a lot of people want to pull over here into this turning lane. But it takes 2 lanes to turn, even just a pickup and horse trailer a lot of times. So then a truck's going to take all of that and more, isn't it, Dust?
Oh, it definitely does. And it depends on the length of your trailer. But I've even had that happen at that same stoplight in Martin. I was trying to make the corner. And I've had this happen several times where they'll come up and as I'm starting into the corner and make it inside me. But the closest one I had, I was already turning. Was halfway into the corner, so my trailer is pulling into here. This car decides to zip up inside, cut right inside me to make that corner, just so he could be a few seconds ahead. And honestly, I should have probably crushed him against the stoplight.
But we don't do that, do we?
Well, like say, as soon as I see him, I panicked and hit the brakes. And I thought, what the heck are you doing? I never understood why people have to be in that much of a hurry. You save 5 seconds. It ain't worth your life, and it ain't worth me going to jail over.
Or your life. Or someone on the road.
Let's be honest, I'm winning this.
So we have talked about the amount of time it takes to stop. They need to take wider turns, so please respect that space for you and for them. And then a huge one that goes kind of along with stopping is when people pull out in front of a truck, then they're just going to turn. You know, like, it's not so bad on the interstate, right, to just get off at an exit. It's still not cool. You know, have some just decency. But when they pull out in front of a truck and then just to turn, how frustrating.
That is probably the biggest thing I don't like more than anything. I'm trying to be nice about this. There's one other deal that I hate worse, but it honestly scares me worse than it. I hate it, but I've seen so many of these. They'll pull out in front of you. They either pass you or they'll pull out off a turn. They'll go sometimes a mile, sometimes a few miles, sometimes a block just to turn in front of you. They don't seem to realize that you might be humming along, 70 mile an hour. All of a sudden, you've got to come screeching to a stop, and then you realize they were turning off.
And it changes your momentum.
It changes everything. And like I say, I'm just desperately trying to do my job, keep my stuff in good shape. And having to stop like that is hard on everything.
And hard on the cattle.
Hard on the cattle, hard on my brakes. All of a sudden, I've lost my momentum. Now I'm not burning fuel as good as I'm supposed to be.
Yep. You had one do that not too long ago, didn't you?
Oh, it was terrible. Like I say, this one really drove me
out in the middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere. There was a minivan sitting right on top of this little knob. I could see nothing else around, and for as long as I could see that knob, that minivan was sitting there. There's nothing in front of me. There's nothing behind me. There's nothing in the other lane. As soon as I get on top of that hill, that minivan pulls out in front of me, tops out at 30 miles an hour. Top the hill, I'm already slowing down, Jake's on. There's nobody in the other lane. Okay, good. I can get in the other lane. The coordination was like a stunt show because I go into the left lane, so does she. We couldn't have coordinated it better with how exactly the same as I did that she did it. So then I've got to blip back into the other lane. And as I'm going around, she stays in that lane, goes to the bottom of the hill, and turns. The turn was maybe half a mile away from where she was, and there was not a soul around in sight anywhere. So why on earth this needed to happen, I don't know. I could get a lot more passionate about it, but Mom doesn't like my little comparison at the end.
Well,
so we're
go ahead and share what you say. If she had pulled back into the right lane.
If she had pulled back into the right lane, I was going to reach over, shut the Jakes off, and say it's between you and Jesus because I'd done everything I could.
And at least she got in the left lane. I mean, I know it's weird, but at least she did. That part was considerate. She was trying to open up the lane for you, but if she just wouldn't have pulled out in the first place,
like
just
I said,
waited for you to get by.
Nothing behind me.
She could have just waited or gone a long time before that. Because
a long time before that.
He could see her for how long was it before?
It had to be at least 5-10 minutes.
So she had that whole time sitting at that approach. She could have pulled out and been done and gone and off the highway before Dustin even got there.
It made no sense to me.
I'm sure, to be honest with you, she was playing on her phone. I hate to say it, but so many people we see. Mike and I were hauling hay, and I mean, we were within 200 yards of this vehicle, and she's sitting at an approach, and we get within 20 feet, no joke, 20 feet, and she starts to pull out in front of us. Thankfully, Mike threw on the horn quick, but I mean, we were going through her car. There was no way to get stopped. There was none. We were going to go smack through her car, and I could see she had been on her phone, hadn't even looked up, and was just sitting there going like this and pulled out. And one, it's scary for us, But you know, there's a kid in that back seat, and I don't care if it's their fault or not. I mean, you're gonna live with that. We have friends, lots of truckers, that have unfortunately been in situations where, even though it wasn't their fault, accidents happened, and they have to live. I mean, and unfortunately, deadly consequences. And they've had to live with those consequences. It sucks.
There's one scenario that scares me worse than any. It's the only one that you cannot prevent.
Yep.
You might walk away from it, but it will traumatize you, because every trucker I've known that it's happened to, it's traumatized them.
Yeah.
Some, it took years to even get back in a car, much less a truck. And that is the suicidal driver. It's terrifying.
Suicide by truck. Literally.
Suicide by truck.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to live anymore, and they don't know how else to do it. So they will literally turn to head on a truck.
Yep.
Because they know they won't walk away from that. And there's no guarantee the trucker walks away from that one either.
But unfortunately, we've known way too much of this.
And the worst part is you cannot predict it. Like everything else, a stupid driver, you can kind of tell if they might be stupid. Weather, you can kind of predict that ahead of time. All of a sudden, this suicidal driver decides to do it. There's nothing you can do, because they'll turn before you can even stop.
Yep.
When it comes to the turning vehicles, the big thing to remember about why we have to take these corners so long is both because we're a long vehicle and we have to pivot.
Yep.
I mean, we're so long that we have to pivot. It's the only way we make it work. But I mean, you figure the average trailer is about 53 foot long. With the truck on front, we're probably about 70, 80 foot long. Probably at least 70, I'd say, probably closer. But in order to make these corners, in order to stay on the road, we have to take them wide. So if you ever wonder why a truck swings clear out, like sometimes even into the other lane, he doesn't have a choice. If he swings it trying to stay just in his own lane, he might curb it at the best case scenario, or he might even take out stoplight if he doesn't.
Because that trailer does not track straight behind where you go.
No, it doesn't. Like say, this is actually something I thought about. There's a lot of snow out there right now. If you want to see what I mean by off-tracking, drive in the snow, turn your own vehicle, and watch your tracks. You'll notice that your front set of tracks are further out than your back axle. And that's small off-tracking that your own vehicle does.
Yeah.
It does it naturally to some extent. Now imagine when the back of your trailer is, like I said, 50 foot behind you, and it pivots.
Yep.
It's going to off-track quite a few feet inside there, usually about 20 feet or so, depending on how sharp you turn.
And then, in my opinion, when you put in, especially live animals that you're hauling, hay can be a little tippy depending on your trailer. Gravel's pretty steady for the most part, but cattle shift and move, and so when you're turning, you need it to be as stable as possible, because if you make a really fast or sharp turn, your cattle are going to shift to the outside, and you run the risk of tipping it over.
You don't even have to be going fast.
Yeah, true enough.
There was a friend of mine up here, up north. They were on a really muddy road trying to haul cattle out of there. The guy told him, no, it's fine, we can make it. He's going, I don't even know if he was going 5 miles an hour when he went around this corner, but it was just so muddy, it just pulled him this way and laid that truck clear on over.
Yeah, because the cattle, you're double decked on there, and so then the cattle's weight, and they all shift. They just can't help it. It's centrifugal force. They shift, and it's just on over you go.
Plus that top deck on them cattle pots, at least on the cattle pots anyway, is way higher. Like, you've seen your regular trailers, their center of gravity is usually sitting right about above your drive axles, right above your tires. On them cattle pots, that's not the case. They try and counteract it by having some down in the belly below that, so it's actually sitting between them, but they're still way up higher than it is normally. It's actually why when it comes to hauling cattle, most of the time, if we don't have to pack our trailers clear tight, we usually throw 1 or 2 more head in the belly. Or if it's not a full load, the belly is the one place that will always be loaded, no matter what.
Yeah, you never just load the top.
Never.
That's a recipe for disaster.
That's a death sentence.
Yeah. Dustin and I have talked about this a lot, that we really truly believe it would be super beneficial when everyone takes their driver's license test, if they could have some more education of some kind for people to understand, because that's it. Most people just don't know. We've grown up with trailers. We've grown up, driving trailers. Dustin drove his first trailer, I think he was 10, like a horse trailer. It's just something we've all done in the cattle ranching world. I mean, a pickup and a horse trailer, not a semi. So you do understand it. But a lot of times people just don't realize. So if we could have some kind of testing, don't you think, Dust?
I agree. Because if you look at the stats, I think I actually saw somewhere, it said that of all the wrecks caused between semis and cars, I think like 70% of it was caused by the car. Because the truck driver, we have to know by law, we have to know exactly how to handle our rigs and how our rigs interact with everything else. We don't have a choice. We have to know that just in order to get our license at all.
Yes, so honestly that, and I think I don't know if it's even possible, I would love to see people do some kind of simulation where they drive a simulation and have to stop. The big thing is the stop, the turns. I think it would help people understand better, don't you?
There needs to be something, like say, there's plenty enough, if you go online, you can find plenty of stuff to show you just how difficult this can be.
True.
And there's plenty of stories out there from guys who have had close calls. I'm hardly the first one to have close call stories.
Yeah.
If you went on YouTube, looked up horror trucking stories or something, you could probably find more videos than you go through in a lifetime. There's not a trucker out there that doesn't have a horror story, usually related to other traffic, oddly enough.
But what you don't know, you don't know.
You don't know
what you don't. So a lot of people don't even know to look this stuff up. So I don't know exactly how to go about getting it, but it's something we've talked about for a long time, that there needs to be more education. So we're doing our tiny little part here by doing this. So, you know, if you want to help educate other people, what can they do with this video?
The best thing you could do is to share this video to everybody you know. Just because if it gets out there, a few more people know. And the more people that know, the more caution there can be. And that's all the guy's asking for, is just a little more caution, a little more patience. Because so much of this happens because people don't know how trucks handle, and they're getting in too much of a hurry. If people just hold up, everybody just needs to take a breath.
Yep.
5 seconds is not going to cost you.
Yep. And then those of us who have loved ones that are truck drivers get to see them again. We get to spend Christmas with them again. And then you get to go home to your family again. And the more people we can educate, I think the better.
Besides, the fewer wrecks we have, the more burgers that are on the table.
Amen to that. All right, hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you share it.